Hello everyone, my name is Ethan Rooshock and welcome to this second episode of Unique Wealth Building, a series where I interview people that have got a unique wealth building strategy. Whether that's running a business or whether it's an investing strategy or whether it's things like pursuing a hobby passion or whether it's just working a job that they really love. Today's guest is Brad from The Guided Investor, and Brad is a financial planner, but he's not your stereotypical financial planner. He's taking a much more modern approach, much more personalized approach. He's not there to sell you a product, but he's there to make sure you're implementing an overall financial strategy that works for you. We talk all about financial planners and what they do, but where the real value in this chat is, I think, is when we talk about investing strategies and money mindsets and how half the battle is actually implementing something. And that while you can have the best laid strategy, if it doesn't get implemented, it doesn't work. I really enjoyed recording this with Brad. He has a YouTube channel where he's got some really valuable content. So I'd love for you to go check that out. All the links are in the description below. So sit back and I hope you enjoy the chat I had with Brad. All right, everyone, we've got our next installment of the Unique Wealth Building series. So we've got Brad here from The Guided Investor. So thanks for being here, Brad.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on board. Really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate anyone that gives up their time, and I'm sure anyone that's giving up their time to watch it today is going to get some good value out of it. So if you want to give everyone a bit of a rundown, brief overview, who you are, what you do.
Sure. So obviously, as you said, my name's Brad. I'm actually a licensed financial advisor. And I have been in the industry for about 14 years now. So I started back in the second year of uni when I was 19, 33 now, if you're quick at maths. And I run my own business, which is called Guided Investor. And really, that's my baby today that I'm sort of trying to build and grow upon.
Yes, it's always interesting because people think of financial planners. I think they just typically think of old men that, are close to retirement that have worked their way up for 30 or 40 years, especially ones that own a business or a partner in something. And it's really good to see there's a shift in the industry that people are willing to go, well, I might be young, but I can still actually provide genuine help and genuine value to people. And that's not going to stop me. And I don't need to go through 30 years just to push a product that, my boss or my previous managers told me is a good product to push. So I'll get into obviously that business in a bit. You also got a YouTube channel. So do you want to plug that a bit?
Yeah, my YouTube channel is obviously called Guided Investor as well. So that's really just a bit of an extension of my business, a bit like your channel is an extension of your business.
Yeah.
So it's I think YouTube's an awesome platform to just be able to connect with different people, share some knowledge. And it's just a great way to share your experiences, really.
Yeah, we just chatted about it off camera about how it's great that when someone is licensed and they've got some kind of qualifications and stuff to talk about it, because a lot of younger people are wanting that visual or talking, and YouTube's obviously where they're going for education. I know myself quite often when I need to learn something of how to do this or how does that work, typically I'm actually, because I suppose I'm on YouTube, I'm going to YouTube and searching it, and you never know what you're going to get. So if you get someone that actually has some qualifications in it, it gives you that bit of confidence that they're not going to be, they're limited to what they can say. So they're only going to give actual, proper, factual information. And they're not trying to just shill a product and get some commissions and stuff. So that's something I really like about your channel, is that it's valuable, and I know that it's trustworthy. So that's
thanks,
big
mate.
plus.
I'm exactly the same. I mean, YouTube, I think, is the second biggest search engine, second to Google. So, to have, and I use it myself, and I guess that's why I started the channel, because it is the go-to when you want to find out something and you want to sort of understand how something works, you YouTube it essentially. And that's how I've been doing some renovations on my house recently, and I've done a few little things myself, and thank you, YouTube, for that.
I tried to do some renovations in my previous house, and I YouTubed it and then quickly closed the video because I realized this is way outside of my scope, and I think I'll get someone else to do it.
Sometimes YouTube makes you realize that you're way out of your depth and you just need to get someone in.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll jump into your business, because obviously we're talking about unique wealth building strategies, and obviously as a business owner, that's going to be how you're building your base of your income. That's going to start to build your wealth, obviously. So what made you want to start a business? Because obviously, like I said, typically in the industry, I know the accounting industry, and I'm imagining the financial planning industry is similar, that there's such a stigma that it's like, work your way up, keep working your way up, starting, whether it's a big company, keep going, do your 20 or 30 years, and then maybe you'll be lucky enough to buy into a partnership, and that's going to, cost you a few $100,000 to get into, and then you're already into a molded company where you're so limited on what you can do. So was that something you considered doing, or what made you go down the path you've taken?
Well, I think you touched on a really important point there, and that is basically where I am at my stage in my life. Obviously, my biggest asset at the moment is my ability to earn an income. And I think that applies to pretty much anyone in their 30s and potentially 40s, or definitely 20s.
Yeah.
And so, I had the option as to, do I want to go down that role and work for someone, or do I want to build my own business? And now, obviously, there's pros and cons of each. But for me, I chose to go down the path of trying to build my own business because, well, firstly, obviously, I do see my business as an asset. It's an asset which I intend to grow over time, and there is a value attached to that. But also, I did start doing my own business because I wanted to take the wank out of financial planning, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to put it other than that. But, I don't like suits. I don't like ties. I don't like sterile offices. I don't like boring conversations. And, typically when people think of financial planning, that's what they think of. Because like you said earlier, it is dominated by an older generation, a generation that basically went into the corporate world, got their irrits with it at some stage, wanted to try something different in their life. So they tried their hand at, financial planning. Like a lot of advisors that you meet over time, they've been BDMs for products and things like that.
Yeah.
And they just see financial planning as, a nice little path to sort of do something different, maybe build their own business or whatever. But for me, I've gone into financial planning from the ground. So I went into university knowing that I wanted to be a financial advisor and I wanted to go in this industry. So I am, fairly young in comparison to a lot of the other people in the industry. But I do think that that's changing because there's been some massive changes in the industry. Some changes are really good. Some changes are not so good. But you will find that the demographic of the financial planning industry is actually changing, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you touched on a few good points. First of all, that when you are younger, there's so much talk about, which we'll talk about investing and stuff a bit later, but there's so much talk about, chasing that. I see on Facebook groups of people chasing, which ETF should I invest in and which Vanguard one's going to be right for me. And they're talking such minuscule things, but then they're failing to realize that, increasing your income by 10 or 15 grand a year is going to give you a lot more funds than trying to get a 0.5% difference on an investment return. Obviously, everything goes into building wealth, etc. But realizing that you've got to work out, how am I going to earn income for the next 20 years of my life, 30 years of my life? And then realizing that, if I want to, and there's nothing wrong with chasing a job. There's plenty of good high-paying jobs that will allow you to do that. But obviously, if you're growing a business, you're growing an asset as well. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go into business, because it's like, if I can grow that business, that's also an asset. And I have no plans to sell the business or anything like that at the moment. But it is an asset that's got a recurring revenue of a client base, etc. Then it might give me the option that maybe I can bring someone else in and do some of that work and free up my time to, whether it's chase new clients or it might be chase a passion project or something like that on the side. So I think that's really cool that you've done it. And like I said, you're changing that stigma of, it doesn't have to be these boring old men in suits. It is changing. And younger people, I think, are going to need financial advice earlier because there's a lot of people that are coming into great wealth earlier. I think a lot of speculative investors have suddenly come into a lot of money, for instance, or younger business owners and stuff. So they're going to want that financial advice earlier. And people are more attracted to people that look like them. It's a classic saying that, if you're younger, you're going to want to speak to a financial planner that potentially feels you and they know what you're talking about and they know your situation better. So I'm sure you'll have a diverse client range. And it's not to say that's all you can deal with, but it's good to see there are other younger people in the industries.
Yeah, and I think that, traditionally a lot of people think as financial planners as a way to make rich people richer as well. It's like someone you go see if you've got a lot of money to invest and they're going to put you in investments, which are going to make you a lot of money as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, the investment aspect of financial planning is just one aspect of it. Investments are a tool in order to implement a strategy. And the most important thing is around the strategy side, having a look at what your income is, what your expenses are, what your current assets are, what your current liabilities are, how that's projected, what are you doing with your cash flow, how much tax are you paying, do you have an estate plan? But all of those, for me, the strategic advice is the important aspect of it. And then once you know what your strategy is, then you go and find things like your investments, which allow you to implement the strategy to get you to where you want to be, essentially. So a lot of people put, the horse before the cart and talk about investments and whatnot. And meantime, they've got a debt over here, which they're paying 15% interest on. I mean, well, it doesn't matter what you think this investment's going to make you. There's steps to follow. And, sometimes people get a bit excited about this and don't want to do the basics. So I think that, financial planning really should be driven by strategy. And then things like product and investment are second to the strategy, essentially. So that's the way I like to see it.
The flashy stuff sounds better, and that's what people get sold on. So that they want to know the best investment. Where am I going to make a 10x return in a day? And there's so much of that. And I guess that's why I think people get this bad vibe from a financial planner, because they go there and suddenly they go, well, I've got to pay for this advice and a strategy. And I didn't want that. I just wanted to know how to get rich. But as you said, it's all got to tie into each other. And that's what I was going to ask you. What does a financial planner do? And I think you really touched on it there really well, is that it's about an overall financial strategy, which a lot of people are lacking, and a lot of people's education isn't there. And to be able to look at an overall approach and go, well, do I have the right insurances? Are my assets going to be protected? Am I actually budgeting? Am I, like you said, optimizing for tax, which obviously is where you then refer that onto an accountant, but having an understanding of that's all a part of a financial plan. And then going, are we allocating assets for investing? And then within that, then you can talk about investments and products within there. But at the end of the day, you've got to actually be allocating money to invest before you even bother about where you're going to invest it.
100%. So you need to have that strategy, and then you can work out where your capital is best allocated. And, it's sometimes, for me, if a client comes in and says, oh, Brian, how much return are you going to make? That's not a client I want to take on board, because it sounds like the client that says, risk-adjusted return.
How much tax am I going to get back?
Yeah, exactly.
You said it's not.
It's not a representation of how good we are at our jobs. Because at the end of the day, whenever you stand to make a big return, you also have more risk. So it's really about getting the best possible risk-adjusted return for clients. And depending on what stage of your life you're at, you might take a lot of risk to get a good return because you're young and you've got plenty of years.
Yeah.
But when you go into retirement, if my retiree clients aren't getting, 15, 20% per annum, well, that's okay with me, because we're trying to preserve capital. We're not trying to get 100% of the upside of all the investments, So there's you really have to consider different risk settings and people's stage in life and things like that. And I always sort of say, for me, financial planning's part art and part science. So the science is the obvious thing, and it's what people sort of focus most on. It's about, running the numbers, working out the investments, learning how to save tax, putting in place strategies and all that kind of stuff. It's about using numbers to work out what's going to help you achieve your financial objectives moving forward. But as I sort of move through the industry and move on and work with more and more people, I realize that there's this massive art side of financial planning. And that's working with understanding people's relationship to money, working out what it is they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it, working out what their financial habits are, and putting together a plan that's going to, tie in with all those things. Because at the end of the day, I can write the best financial plan from a mathematical perspective, but if it doesn't get implemented, well, then it's not worth the paper it's written on, So there's a lot more to financial planning than just the numbers. And for me, it's really quite exciting working with people around their finances, because, for a lot of people, they'd rather talk about their sex lives than they would about their finances.
Yeah.
And so it is a very intimate conversation that you can have with people. It's something that can really make a difference in their life. And, helping people to build a stronger situation and have more money isn't about, them being able to go out and buy a flashier car. It's about them having more opportunities in life, because that's what money does. It just creates opportunities for you. It lets you work when you want, do what you want, and live where you want, essentially. And so for me, that's the power of having money and having a strong financial situation. So I think, while on the surface, it can seem a little bit vain investing and, because people see it as rich getting richer, essentially, but it's not about that. It's about giving people opportunities in life, which I think is so cool.
I think that's what makes you unique and your business unique, is exactly what you've said. It's your mindset and philosophy towards it. But It's not just about trying to make people rich. And obviously, as a part of your role, obviously you do want to improve someone's money situation, but it's about that changing their mindset towards money and making sure that they actually implement the plan. Because I can imagine there'd be nothing more frustrating than for you to someone to pay you this money, they lay out the best laid plans, and then next minute they don't do it. And you see it all the time in people's personal lives. Everyone has that friend or family member that they know is just terrible with money. You can put, and they'll talk to people, and obviously me as an accountant, people come to me, and obviously it's not something I do, but they'll go, oh, how can I budget better and stuff like that? And I can give them a base of, look, you need to just implement some type of budget or something that works for you. But you can see they don't follow it. Day one, they go and spend over what they've allowed themselves to spend, for instance. And there's nothing more frustrating because you've got to change someone's mindset before you can actually change what they're doing. Because once their mindset changes, they actually enjoy. I'm sure you'd have people that actually enjoy implementing their plan and just sticking to it. Might be a boring old plan, but it ticks the boxes of what they need.
Yeah, and I think if you show them where they're headed, I mean, if you tell someone, oh, you got to save money because that's a good thing to do, well, no one's going to do it because they don't understand where that's getting them. But if you show them and you have a roadmap and you outline exactly what it's going to take to get from A to B and what it means to your life when you get to B, that's where it gets empowering. And you're dead right when you said about, people not implementing the plan, because for most people, procrastination is what kills their finances.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take a financial advisor to sit down and tell you, oh, you probably should be investing part of your income, or you should be paying down extra towards your debt, or you should be contributing a little bit more to your super, or whatever it may be. People often know they should be doing that. But it's about that accountability factor. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't do it unless they're held accountable for it. So I think, that's a prime example of where, and it's a bit like having a financial plan is a bit like, I guess, having a personal trainer at a gym.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone can go into the gym, they can lift weights, and they can, if they do it consistently over time, they can normally get a pretty good result. But if you go and you have a personal trainer at the gym, well, you're going to have a more structured sort of workout. You're going to be pushed more than you probably push yourself.
Yeah.
And it's going to be those little intricacies that they show you about, adjust your body movements slightly this way or that way to get a better result. And it's about, that accountability factor again. And like having a personal trainer at the gym can really sort of help you achieve your fitness goals. I think having a financial planner in your personal lives is a very similar sort of outcome. We got the expertise to tell you what you should be doing in order to reach your goals, but we've also got that relationship to help make sure that you actually do it,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I love the PT example. So, I can go to the gym and I know that it's not going to be, I then have seen personal trainers in the past and I definitely know what I'm doing isn't perfect. And I know that I could go there and I can get results by going every day, every couple of days or whatever. And eventually I'm going to get fitter or put on a bit of muscle or whatever. But maybe it isn't in a defined way, that there's things that I could improve on. I've read a lot on, I see a lot on Facebook groups and stuff of people going, oh, giving financial plans in particular a really bad name, and because it's going to cost them money, and, oh, I don't need that. But like I say to people, well, it might not be for you. It's for the person that isn't educated on money or is educated and wants someone just to go, look, I think I'm on the right track. Can you just make sure that I've covered all bases? And their investing strategy may be perfect, but they may have forgot to make sure they've got insurance. They may be self-employed and don't have that, or they may have no will, or they may have no estate plan, or whatever it is. And it might be that you tick 7 of the boxes in the financial plan and make sure you tick those final 3. So it's not about them doing everything for you.
Yeah, and I've come across clients that I sit down and they run me through their strategy and things like that. And I'm like, well, mate, guys, you're doing a fantastic job yourself. Yeah. You don't actually need me. And then I outline a few little tidbits about what they can be doing better. And that's all they really need. And then I've got the other people who they've got families, they're time poor, they're career driven, they've got their own thing going on. And they just don't want to have to worry about any of that stuff. And they just want to outsource it. And they want to know that they've got someone that they know there and they trust. And, he's going to recommend what is in the best interest of me. So I don't have to think about it. And so there's different camps of people. And I'm not under the illusion that I think everyone needs a financial planner. Not at all. I think that, there is a lot of good resources out there to, if you put the time and attention in and you do it consistently, to be able to get a pretty good result yourself. But obviously there is a market for financial advisors as well, for either the people that just, like you said, don't have the knowledge, or the people that don't have the desire to learn about these things, and they would rather just outsource it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's really interesting, and I think people can straight away see that you're trying to build up a trust relation business and doing it by providing value to people and not shilling products or anything like that. And that's what I really love about what you're doing. So I'll jump into it, and I spoke about it on the previous episode that I've done on this, talking about money motivations, and we've talked about it a bit there of, what motivates people to come to money. Is it just that money is a part of them growing a successful business, or they're investing, so therefore they're obviously going to get returns, and that general achievement of doing something, and money is just a secondary part of that. Others are chasing money for that lifestyle and the riches, and they want the fancy cars and they want the fancy watches, and I tell people, well, that's okay. If that's what you want, you can chase that. And I'm sure you'd see plenty of people that's why they're wanting to put a financial plan, because they want to do that. And then the other side of it I see is people are chasing that freedom of time. And obviously you've discussed that of, well, if I run a business, maybe I can have some time off, or I can do that. And what's your opinion on those kind of things? And I'm sure it's a combination of things for yourself, but what does motivate you to obviously do a business and invest? But is there an end goal with why you're doing these things money-wise?
Yeah, so like I sort of touched on before, I think for me, the best thing that money does is gives you opportunities in your life.
Yeah.
And now I love what I do. I love working. Part of the reason why I've got my business is because I like to build stuff. So, I see my business as a challenge that I can sort of build up, make better, help people along the way. And then also I like building my personal wealth, and I love the concept of, building up an asset base, which is going to provide you passive income. So, you don't have to work. But, at the end of the day, even though I don't want to retire because I enjoy what I do want to be in a position where work is a choice and not an obligation. And I think that's a very empowering position to be in. And at the end of the day, again, it just comes back to what motivates me is the opportunities that money gives you. And I think, building my own brand and having the type of relationship I want with my clients is what gives me the motivation to sort of want to build my own business. Because as I'm sure you can attest to, I mean, in the early days of building a business, it's not easy. You're wearing 100 hats. I mean, you are the secretary, you're doing a lot of admin. I've got a little bit of help, obviously. But, in the early days, you're doing everything. You're the marketer, your HR, your payroll, you're implementing all the advice. You're doing everything. And it's a lot of risk. And it's a lot of work. And generally in the short term, you make less money. But there's always that idea that if you get it right and you enjoy what you're doing, then in the long term, it's going to pay those extra dividends. And that's when you achieve a new level than you could achieve if you just sort of done it as an employee,
Yeah, I can definitely relate to a lot of that. Obviously being in a similar position to you, and you're doing it for that sense of freedom. And I think there's a real mindset change of that day that, and you see it read stories of people that have reached what they deem as financial independence. And all of them just keep doing what they're doing. But it's that mindset shift of go, well, I'm choosing to do this, and therefore they feel more confident about it. And I think people get confused with business owners, because obviously what I've just talked about is I'd love to have that freedom that if I want to go on a 3-week trip overseas or something, I can, because I've built up that financial position to do it. But then they get confused because then you see how many hours business owners put in, but you normally love what you're doing. And I know last night I got home from a meeting and jumped on the computer and spent like an hour watching YouTube videos on a particular thing I was wanting to learn more about to help grow my business. And I think I finished up at 11 o'clock or something, and people were going, well, why are you still working then? But I loved what I was doing. And, the thing I shouldn't be doing is that I think I woke up at 4:30 and was sending messages to someone that's in a different country talking about a particular thing. But you just do it because you love it, and eventually you want that freedom, and you may not change what you're doing. And like you said, it's all about growing. Yeah.
I think you have to do it because you've got a passion for it. I think if you're doing it solely for money, you're never gonna get it. Because definitely. you have to put in the extra yards, and that only comes with enjoyment and passion around what you're doing. So I think if you're solely money focused, you're just not going to deliver the perfect service at the end of the day. But it's going to be a massive chore doing it, so you're going to be pretty miserable along the way.
Yeah, and it's all about building that service that's got a reputation to it. And like you said, it's that you're putting your face to this. Is that you've got a YouTube channel, for instance, you've got a business that it's you. You're not hiding behind something. You're not running a retail store where no one knows who you are because it's through the internet. You've got your face to it, so it's your reputation on the line. You want to build that relationship with clients because at the end of the day, if someone's happy and they refer you, it grows your business, but also makes you feel like, well, I've done the right thing and I've genuinely helped someone.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of that's the more the satisfaction that, yes, there's a money side to it because they're a paying client, for instance, but the satisfaction of you providing a service and growing that and then providing another service to another person that has got value out of it is definitely the most rewarding part for me. And it sounds like it's similar to you.
Yeah, and I mean, like, especially with what I do for those ongoing type clients, you end up building a great relationship with them, and it's kind of like your work becomes helping out a friend, and that's pretty cool business to be in.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, there is some stresses with it as well because you take on a lot of responsibility when you're helping someone with their life savings essentially.
Yeah,
it's not something that should be taken lightly. But with the right education and educating your clients about the risks and the rewards of different strategies and different investments and things like that, you can come to an outcome where everyone's comfortable with it. They understand what's going on and they understand why it's going on, and there's that trust in the relationship and they know exactly what's happening, so it runs really smoothly, which is really nice.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the word education. That's what I want to jump into next. Now, obviously, you're going to have much more education than what some people I talk to because not everyone is running a business that's involved in a financial institution, etc. But obviously, tax, for instance, what's your knowledge on that? Is it something you've cared about? Because obviously, as a business owner, you don't give advice on tax. You're obviously in an industry where people are going to ask about it, but have you then thought that, well, I need to make sure I'm educated to a certain level on that?
Yeah, well, I actually done my Master of Accounting for that reason, So my undergrad was a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in financial planning and economics.
Yeah.
And then when I started working in the financial planning industry, I realized, a lot of the strategies and things I implement are based around tax, how to structure investments, how to minimize tax, or you have to have a good understanding of tax to be a good financial advisor. Yeah, so while definitely. I don't set up trusts or companies, or I don't do tax returns or anything like that for people. And, whatever there is specialized tax advice, I always say, go talk to an accountant like yourself. I think you do need to have a good understanding of tax. But for me, the one thing where people go wrong with tax and building wealth is a lot of the time they let the tax of implications make a difference to what they're doing. They let the tax sort of drive their investments and things like that. Whereas for me, tax is a byproduct of investing. So for example, people love investment properties and they love negative gearing investment properties. And the reason, you ask them, why do you do it? And they say, well, because they get a big tax return at the end of the year. And I'm like, okay, well, that's nice. It's nice to get a big tax return. But generally, and you can sort of back this up, hopefully, if you get a big tax return, it means that you've got a lot of expenses.
Yeah.
And so, and it's a deductible expense is really, all it is an expense you get a discount on equal to your marginal tax rate, essentially. So for me, to say, I want to negative gear a property because I'm going to save tax, well, that's not a good enough reason to invest. You should go into every investment with the intention that it's going to, over time, improve your net asset position. So whether that's because it's producing you income or whether it's growing over time, that should be the aim of, investing and trying to build wealth, not so, you can save a little bit of tax. And I think that's definitely where a lot of people sort of go wrong, particularly on the property side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really interesting point you've said there on tax, because I've come across it with people that have spoke to me about the tax implications of investments. And especially lately, I've had a few clients that are involved in crypto and have made like a really good gain. It might be $100,000 or something. And are so concerned that, well, if I sell that, I'm going to pay $30,000 or $35,000 in tax. And not looking at that, well, they've actually made still after that, they're going to have $65,000 that is bettered off their wealth. And if you offered them that straight up, they would happily take that. And negative gearing, I've spoke about negative gearing on my channel before, and my dislike for doing it just for a tax thing is it's just insane to just do it for that. And I've seen people that have had incredibly negatively geared properties of up to $15,000 or $20,000 in losses a year, and some of that's book losses, but still, they're then relying significantly on growth of that property to cover that. And your education story is so similar to mine, that I've got the Bachelor of Commerce, and then halfway through that decided to add on the Bachelor of Applied Finance, because that was covering all the financial planning topics. And again, at that stage, and at the moment, I still have no intention of becoming a financial planner, but I need to understand how super works and all that kind of stuff, because again, they go hand in hand, and I'm implementing part of a strategy, and therefore I need to have an idea of how the other side works. So therefore I can go to a financial planner like yourself and go, oh, this is the client's situation. This is what we're aiming to achieve. Can you just direct him in that? But obviously I've given him an idea of, well, I think that's how it's going to work. Go get that proper advice. So I think if you're in any industry, it helps to have it. But in particular, obviously you had to have some tax knowledge. So when it comes to general money education, obviously you're obviously interested in money and stuff, but where did that come from? Was it a lot of people, it's their parents, or whether it's some it is the schooling system, or some it's friends or family, etc. So where did that come from for you?
So we already talked on like the formal education side of things, but I think there's what you can learn formally is obviously limited, and not all of it applies to the real life. And so that informal education that you get along the way is so important. So for me, like I mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for 14 years. So I've seen a lot of different people's situations. I've written a lot of strategies. I'm surrounded by it every single day. I'm always reading the news. I'm always, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube and things like that. And just, I take an interest in this. So all of that education that I've sort of picked up along the way really adds to my knowledge pool, I guess. And, a lot of the education that I didn't learn at university as well was around that money mindset side of things. What drives people, what's people's why, how do you implement certain strategies so people actually follow it? You don't learn that stuff from actually a university degree. You learn that stuff from being in the industry and implementing different plans and seeing how things work over time,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And there's a lot of really cool resources out there these days.
The informal education is so important, because I know in the accounting degree and the commerce degree, you learn so much as if you were going to go account for a multinational company. And that's such a specific thing that very few people are doing. And you see it again in the financial planning things, that the books have these examples that are crazy. And it's like, you would never come across some of these things purely because they don't even make sense from, say, a lot of the tax examples were like, oh, if you did this kind of distribution, and it's like, no one actually does that, because it doesn't put them in a better financial position. So it's interesting in that education. I think that's a really key point, is that it's informal education. The more you can educate yourself outside of just courses, and not all education that you're going to receive is going to be good, but the more you do, you can start to differentiate between, oh, that person I can trust and that person I can't. And you start to learn that. And the biggest thing is, the more you do that, the more you'll be able to pick up on, that friend that says, oh, I invested in this and it's a great opportunity and everyone should be doing it. You can quickly tune those things out and know what's good and what's not good.
Yeah. And over time, I've sort of developed my own way to sort of see wealth and how the wealth building process sort of works. And whatever I recommend for clients, I implement myself. So for instance, my philosophy around building wealth, really, there's 4 phases to it. First of all, you need to build a really good financial foundation. Second, you need to leverage off that financial foundation to build wealth. Third, you need to transition. And then the 4th phase is where you have your asset base that you need and you've achieved that financial freedom, where work is a choice and not an obligation. So for me, I implement all of that in my personal life. And if you're interested in the personal side of things, I can run you through that as well. But I think that, it's taken me a while to sort of work out how all the pieces fit together. And, is there a sequence to this, or is it different for everyone? And the answer is a bit of both. And so, there's lots of different things that you can implement in your finances. And one thing might be great for one person, and one thing might be bad for another.
Exactly.
And so that's where, it can get a little bit confusing. And so, unless, like we were talking about earlier, unless you want to put some time in and work it out yourself, then sometimes, it's worthwhile seeing someone to help you with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you're obviously limited to what you can talk about when it comes to products and stuff like that, but just in general, you obviously, I normally ask people at this stage, oh, do they, and are they aware of shares and have they invested and stuff like that? And obviously, I know that you're aware of these kind of things, but how do you find like implementing that? Because obviously you're talking about it all day, and I think that's really good that you then do follow through, and you've obviously got your own strategy and stuff like that. And I don't need you to touch on too specific, but what's your philosophy when it comes to investing?
So I pretty much whatever. I think that if I didn't practice what I preach, well, then I wouldn't believe in what I'm preaching, so I wouldn't do it. So I pretty much, what I do for myself is very similar, depending on the client's circumstances, obviously, but what I help clients do. And it starts with the basics, So as part of, phase one of building a financial foundation, one thing that I've done is I've built up a really good emergency fund. That's my liquid, readily available capital that I can use if there's either a sudden loss of income or a sudden expense that comes up, and it just really underpins your financial situation. I've obviously got, my principal residence, and, I think owning a principal residence is a great way to not only strengthen your financial position because you've got a growth asset behind you, but also, give you more security because no one can kick you out. No one can tell you what to do. It's your home. And as an accountant, you'll understand that it's a great CGT-free asset.
There's plenty of tax benefits to it.
There's tax benefits to it. And eventually, when you get rid of the mortgage on your house, you get rid of one of the biggest expense items, and that is housing costs. So I think, there's a lot of benefits in owning a principal residence. So I've got my principal residence. I've also got an investment property. For me and what we were talking about earlier, my intention behind this property is to help me grow wealth. So at the moment, it's at the stage where any income that I generate by it is more than enough to cover any expenses related to it. So I'm not looking at it as a way to save tax. I'm looking at it as a way to build wealth. And I think that, with any property investment, you really should go into it with a long-term horizon because property is expensive to buy. You got all stamp duty and all the costs associated with buying. It's also expensive to sell. It is one of those asset classes where you try and get yourself the best piece of land that you can. And then, you let it do its thing over the long term. I've also got an investment bond. There's a few tax benefits of investing through an investment bond. And so both me and my wife, we're sort of, we've got decent marginal tax rates. And so investing through an investment bond makes a lot of sense for us. It's also a great way to sort of dollar cost average into investments. And certain investment bonds also provide you a really cheap lending facility, which is pretty cool. But then I also have a diversified investment portfolio. So when I put together my portfolio, I do it exactly the same as what we do with clients. So through the business, we have an investment committee, which consists of myself, 3 other advisors, and an external asset consultant. We sit down on a regular basis and we look at what's happening in the economy. We look at how that may impact portfolios and we make changes accordingly. So I think that, the diversified investment portfolio where I've got exposure to Aussie shares, international shares, property, infrastructure, alternatives, even some defensives in there. It makes a lot of sense, and that's always adapting depending on where I see markets and things like that. And for me, moving forward, that's where on the personal side of things, I will be allocating a fair bit of wealth into that diversified portfolio. And obviously the other part is, the other bucket we have is our superannuation. And I love superannuation because I'm sure you do too, because it's a very tax effective vehicle. I don't know any other investment that gives you a tax deduction for investing money on your behalf. So it's a really good structure to be using. Obviously with the downside that is a long-term strategy because I can't touch it. But I think, if you're not utilizing your super, you're probably not doing yourself a justice really.
Yeah. I think that whole diversification of investing is great to have that understanding that, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. It's such a cliche saying, but people do it and then they wonder why they either have these crazy gains or these crazy losses, and it's not flattened out at all. And look, some people want to live like that, but it's different. And obviously something I talk about on my channel all the time is crypto. And I'm sure as a financial planner, you're getting hit up with this because you're getting either people that have made significant wealth and realizing that they've done something risky, therefore wanting to shift that out and move it into something more diversified, or you're getting people that, and I get the comments, I want to move all my super into crypto. How do I do that? Which I'm sure you would advise heavily against. But yeah, just want to give like a bit of a touch on one, obviously your brief opinion on it, and two, how people are approaching on that, and what is happening, because I'm sure it's going to be something that's going to impact the people wanting to shift. It might be a portion of their investment or a portion of their super, and I'm sure super companies are definitely looking at it. So
yeah. So the crypto sort of discussion is one that I don't get too involved in. And the reason being is that it's very speculative in nature. So I don't have a problem with allocating part of your investments to something speculative. Because I think that, it's that risk return trade-off. The only time I get really concerned is when people allocate all or a large portion of their capital to something speculative. But for me, I think the blockchain technology has a place in the world. I think that it's a great technology that we'll utilize moving forward. But for me, the question I'm struggling with is that technology going to be used by governments and central banks, or is that technology going to remain as an independent type technology separate to governments and central banks? Now, I don't know the answer to that question. But one thing I will say is that governments will never give up control of currency. And at the end of the day, if you want to live in a country like Australia, well, you have to use the Australian dollar, and they force that through taxes. I mean, if you're going to work in Australia, you're going to pay tax in Australian dollars. Everyone uses Australian dollars, and that's not going to change, because if a government were to give up control of their currency, they give up the control to look after the economy, essentially, because they use currency for fiscal and monetary policy. And so they're never going to give up control of that. But does independent currencies, digital currencies like Bitcoin, for instance, can that be a secondary market that acts as a store of wealth? And the answer to that, really, I think, is potentially. I mean, at the end of the day, if enough people believe in Bitcoin, then it's worth something, because there is a finite amount of these things.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if enough people want a finite amount of something, well, then there's value to that. So, if people believe in it as a store of wealth, and they want to use it to get away from fiat currency or anything like that, then I think that it's definitely got a place in the world. But for me, it's very speculative, and I don't have a problem with investing in it, but just keep it small.
Yeah. No, and I think there's a few points I really want to touch on there. One, I think the issue with keeping it small is that people that have made significant gains, they may have started as a small portfolio portion.
That's very true.
You have 10 grand to invest on a real basic level, and you have 2 grand in crypto, and people go, okay, 20%, that might be fair enough. Suddenly that 2 grand has grown to 40 grand, and suddenly that's 5 or 6 times anything else they've got in their portfolio, and they end up with some issues there, and they don't want to rebalance because they're like, oh, well, this is going well, and that's an issue. And I think you've got some good points there on the government thing is such a thing. And I really find it interesting, because I'm a big believer in the blockchain technology, etc. But I also understand that I think people are naive to go, oh, the government are just going to give up and Bitcoin's going to become a global currency. Because especially, some of these overseas countries in particular, they're not giving up. That's their thing that runs their country, and it gives them power, and it allows them to look after their people, as you said. And to them just to say that, to give up. And I think the way that you're describing Bitcoin as a store of wealth, I think is something that will be more likely. Or I think there'll be maybe projects that have a genuine use case. Ethereum's one that I'm seeing people actually genuinely using to transact in marketplaces and store smart contracts, etc. But I think 98% of what's out there is people just they've got no actual value at the moment. They've got value because people are trading it and it's deeming it value. But in the long term, when a bank comes along and says, well, we've got some kind of blockchain technology and it solves a lot of those issues that people or concerns people had, there's going to be, well, people are just going to back a lot of these things. So yeah, I think it's an interesting space, and something that's probably even more speculative is NFTs. And I'm just interested is it something you're even aware of? And yeah, what's your thoughts there?
I'm aware of NFTs and, how it's used of, again, the blockchain technology. But I'm definitely not an expert in the area. It's just, it's a bit out there for me.
I've spent a lot of time researching and recently, purely mainly on the smart contract side of things.
Yeah, okay.
am really intrigued in how that's going to run, of someone's will being stored on a blockchain technology because it's got the smart contract, and potentially that will may eventually be able to have the smart contract that then goes, well, this is how the funds are going to be distributed, and those kind of
and
things.
I think that is pretty cool.
And I think that's the cool side of it. The whole NFT thing as pictures and stuff like that is that's a whole different speculation. There's a difference between supporting someone's artwork that's $300 or $1,000, for instance, that people will do. People have artwork on their walls, and that makes sense. When someone's buying an art piece that's $150,000, that's where it's a whole different level. And it's an interesting thing. And I've asked a few other guests in the past that, if someone was to make a digital image of you, is there a physical characteristic that you go, oh, that's what I'd want it to show?
Well, physical characteristic, I'm not sure. I feel like the main characteristic is it would just need to be free, because I don't think it's worth much more than that.
Yeah.
But in terms of physical characteristic, put whatever you want on there.
It's an interesting thing. And it's an interesting space. And I think there's, like anything, is you've got to, when you're putting money into something, you've got to determine why you're doing it. And I talked about it before. If someone wants to go and spend $7,000 on a watch, but they love it and that's what they want, that's do it for that reason, not to do it because you want to show it off and go, oh, look, I can afford a Rolex. Or, you go and buy a $50,000 NFT because you want it and you genuinely loved an artist and you've got the money to splash. Go do that. But if you're going to, you said about it before, high risk, potentially high reward, but also it's a high risk for a reason. And that's why I think sometimes people are trying to justify that they're investing when really a lot of people are gambling on whether it's crypto or whether it's NFTs, etc. That's their own choice. And unless you can justify a reason behind why something has value, then I don't think you should be investing without understanding that you're just gambling, and then that's your own choice. But don't try and justify and sell to other people that what you're doing has value if you don't understand.
And it's very interesting. Like ASIC's really cracking down at the moment on a lot of them pump and dump schemes, because there's a lot of Facebook groups and all the different Twitter accounts and things like that are just spruiking different small stocks or cryptos or something like that, and they get in early, they spruik it, and then they get out when it goes up, and that's at the end of the day that's illegal. You can't be doing that. A lot of people. And there's a lot of crap out there, like the Squid Games coin or whatever, that just went bonkers. And it's just, that's the kind of stuff you really need to be wary of.
I think there was an ASIC. I didn't read it all, and I want to go back and read it. There was something I seen the other day about it was to do with digital currencies and stuff. And where I've had a few people come to me and go, I want to start my own coin or something like that. And when I've said to them, well, do you understand the ASIC implications of having a financial instrument or financial security of how that works? And I said, that goes beyond what I can do as an accountant, and it goes beyond what you can do as a financial planner at times. There's a lot of legal advice and stuff people are needing to do to make sure they comply. And you can't go and sell a coin and say it's worth $1, but you're going to get 20% of all revenue of a pool, and we're going to invest as a pool. And they're not realizing they're creating a financial product, which you can't just do like that and just go, who cares? It's decentralized. Is that there's, unfortunately, and I think there's going to be changes in the way governments handle these things, but 100%. There's a reason why it's there, is to protect the mum and dad investor that goes, oh yeah, I've heard of this Squid Game coin, I'm going to invest in it, and suddenly loses $10,000 because it didn't even exist, for instance. And that's why we have regulations in place. And sometimes regulations suck because they do limit creativity and stuff, but they're there for a reason, and that's to protect. A lot of the time, it's the people at the bottom, and that's why it's a rug pull, because it's the people at the bottom that lose out, and it ends up being the rich get richer schemes.
Yeah, and I had a client the other day. She's in her 60s, retired, and she sent me this dodgy Facebook article talking about some cryptocurrency that could make a lot of money, and she said, "Oh, Brad, I could make lots of money." And that's what scares me, when people like that come across one of those articles, not having any background in this, not having any understanding of what's going on, but believing the hype around it and just, start allocating capital to it. That's where, obviously she didn't do it because she's an advisor and she, whatever she does, she runs past me. But there's a lot of people that aren't advised and would do that. And, it's unfortunate that those people will obviously, get stung by it financially, And sure, there's the thing about, you take your own responsibility, and I 100% agree that people do need to take responsibility for their actions. But at the same time, you can't be too much of a cowboy out there, I don't think. I think it's just irresponsible.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I see it, and I have clients that have made plenty of money off things, and whether it's a speculative share investment or whether it's that, and all I can do is obviously educate on tax implications, etc., and just remind them that, unless you've got, there's the few people that have such an eye for things, and they do the technical analysis or they do the fundamental analysis and are great at that, but that's very few and far between. And just because especially if you've made money when it's in a bull market and everything's going up in value, and we've had some crazy growth across every market and every asset class since the dips from the initial shutdowns we had. But if the whole market's gone up, and you've gone up, it doesn't necessarily mean you've picked something crazy and suddenly you should do this full time.
Yeah, there's a saying around that. Don't confuse luck with skill in a rising market. So that's exactly what you're saying. That's
very true. So no, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find, if they're looking to get in touch with you, whether it's for financial planning advice or whether it's just to check out your YouTube channel? I'll leave some links and stuff below, but yeah, happy to plug where you are and what's going on with you at the moment.
Yeah, so you can basically just type in Guided Investor and you pretty much find it all. So Guided Investor on YouTube, guidedinvestor.com.au, Guided Investor on Instagram. I was quite lucky. I got all the handles.
You've got the consistency.
I've got them all. So. It's hard to get a business name these days that is available and has the social tags. So yeah,
Guided Investor, isn't it?
I was quite lucky.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you being here. And for anyone that is looking for a genuine modern approach to financial planning, Brad's definitely your guy, because he definitely, as you can see, his mindset and reasons for doing it are there. It's not to go, well, if I sell you this product, I'm going to get the highest commission. That's not what it's about. It's about genuinely helping you. And at the end of the day, if you go to an accountant or you go to a financial planner, you go to a mortgage broker, you go to a lawyer, their aim should be improving your position, not leaving you in the same position, but they've collected a fee. So that's something I really like what you're doing. And I really appreciate your time. So thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate you wanting to have me on and having a chat. It was really good.
No, appreciate it. And go and check out Brad's channel on YouTube, and there'll be plenty of education. And make sure you check out some of my other content I've got and some of these other future videos I've got coming up. So appreciate you, everyone watching, and talk to you again soon. So
see you, mate.
Catch you later, mate.